This is a day that our God has made. Welcome, everyone, to Wayfarers Chapel, the National Memorial to Emanuel Swedenborg. I'm Reverend Dr. David Brown. How's everyone doing? I'm doing well, thanks. It's my last Sunday for 3 Sundays. I'm not going to be here. Thank you, former board of director member. I love that approval. You will be covered here by Reverend Dr. Jonathan Mitchell next Sunday, and then Reverend Robert McCluskey the following 2 Sundays. Who's here joining us for their very first time? All right. Warm welcome to all of you. Well, let's see. I have all kinds of exciting news. Not only me leaving, that got some excitement, but here you are. If you're joining us for the first time, this is, well, likely Lucille. Look at you, all the way from Africa. Look at that, awesome. Okay, well, thank you. I'll give you a hug. Let's see. So we do have coffee, I believe. I saw some coffee back there. We're just going to have after service right behind us in the colonnade back there. And this space, it's pretty special. Probably not your average church you've attended over the years. You're surrounded by a redwood forest. That doesn't happen too often in Southern California specifically. And August 15th and 16th, I just found out this past week, Wayfarers Chapel. It's going to be voted on. It's the only structure in California, 2022, and officially this year, 2023, for National Historic Landmark status. Go Chapel! So that is extra exciting to be at this stage where everything looks like it's going to be a go, and even put word into my liaison at the LA Times. So it's going to get some big attention, hopefully, following those dates, 15th and 16th. There may be ways to view that. But wait, there's more. Not only do you enjoy this world-class sacred space, you get to hear people preaching here and spreading good news. But you've probably heard some fantastic music over the years, including one special female voice. And it's not the shrub here. It's not the singing shrub from Three Amigos. No. Come on out, Michelle Berry. I'll give you a hug. She will sadly be departing here, but tell us what you're going to be doing.
I'm going to study clinical psychological science in Maryland, but I'm very sad because I love being here, so thank you everybody for being part of this, and I've loved singing here, and it's been an honor, so.
All right. Put our hands together. Yes, thank you. I'm going to invite you all to rise as you are able. This service has gone to the birds. It's time to turn, turn, turn. Please rise as you're able for opening song. Turn, turn, turn. So the scripture readings are available on the QR code at the entrance there. First reading is 1 Kings 10, verses 1 through 13. The same reading is also found in 2 Chronicles 9, verses 1 through 12. When the queen of Sheba heard of the fame of Solomon, fame due to the name of the Lord, she came to test him with riddles. She came to Jerusalem with a very great retinue, with camels bearing spices and very much gold and precious stones. And when she came to Solomon, she told him all that was on her mind. Solomon answered all her questions. There was nothing hidden from the king that he could not explain to her. When the queen of Sheba had observed all the wisdom of Solomon, the house that he had built, the food of his table, the seating of his officials, and the attendance of his servants, their clothing, his valets, and his burnt offerings that he offered at the house of the Lord, it took her breath away. So she said to the king, "The report was true that I heard in my own land of your accomplishments and of your wisdom, but I did not believe the reports until I came, and my own eyes saw them. Not even half had been told me. Your wisdom and prosperity far surpassed the report that I had heard. Happy are your wives, happy are these, your servants, who continually attend you and hear your wisdom. Happy are these, your servants, who continually attend you. Blessed be the Lord your God, who has delighted in you and set you on a throne of Israel. Because the Lord loved Israel forever, he has made you king to execute justice and righteousness." Then she gave the king 120 talents of gold, a great quantity of spices and precious stones. Never again did spices come in such quantity as that which the queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. Moreover, the fleet of Hiram, which carried gold from Ophir, brought from Ophir a great quantity of almug wood and precious stones. From the almug wood the king made supports for the house of the Lord and for the king's house, lyres also, and harps for the singers. No such almug wood has come or been seen to this day. Meanwhile, King Solomon gave the queen of Sheba every desire that she expressed, as well as what he gave her out of Solomon's royal bounty. Then she returned to her own land with her servants. Next reading is Psalm 119, 105 through 112. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. I have sworn an oath and confirmed it to observe your righteous ordinances. I am severely afflicted. Give me life, O Lord, according to your word. Accept my offerings of praise, O Lord, and teach me your ordinances. I hold my life in my hand continually, but I do not forget your law. The wicked have laid a snare for me, but I do not stray from your precepts. Your decrees are my heritage forever. They are the joy of my heart. I incline my heart to perform your statutes forever, to the end. From the Gospel of Matthew 12, verses 38 through 42, the sign of Jonah. Then some of the scribes and Pharisees said to him, "Teacher, we wish to see a sign from you." But he answered them, "An evil and adulterous generation asks for a sign, but no sign will be given to it, except the sign of the prophet Jonah. For just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the sea monster, so for 3 days and 3 nights the Son of Man will be in the heart of the earth. The people of Nineveh will rise up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it, because they repented the proclamation of Jonah. And indeed something greater than Jonah is here. The queen of the south will rise up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it, because she came from the ends of the earth to listen to the wisdom of Solomon. And indeed something greater than Solomon is here." From the writings of the Christian mystic Emanuel Swedenborg in Apocalypse Explained 706. The scribes and Pharisees said, "Master, we desire to see from thee a sign." And he answering said, "An evil and adulterous generation seeketh a sign, but no sign shall be given to it, but the sign of Jonah the prophet. As Jonah was in the belly of the whale 3 days and 3 nights, so shall the Son of Man be in the heart of the earth 3 days and 3 nights. That a sign here means testification, that they would be persuaded and believe that the Lord was the Messiah and the Son of God who was to come is plain. For the miracles which the Lord wrought in great numbers, and which they saw, were no signs to them, because miracles, as said above, are signs only to the good. Jonah was in the belly of the whale 3 days and 3 nights, and this was taken for a sign, because it signified the burial and resurrection of the Lord, thus the complete glorification of his human. 3 days and 3 nights, signifying completeness. And may the Lord now add blessing to the reading, the hearing, the living out of these holy words. Amen.
There's a somebody I'm longing to see. I hope that he turns out to be someone who'll watch over me. I'm a little lamb who's lost in the wood. I know I could always be good to one who'll watch over me. Although he may not be the man some girls think of as handsome, to my heart he carries the key. Won't you tell him please to put on some speed? Oh how I need someone to watch over me. Someone to watch over me.
After hearing the story of Jonah at Sunday school, a little girl repeated the story at her school on Monday. Her teacher said it was physically impossible for a whale to swallow a human, because even though it's a very large mammal, its throat is very small. The little girl said, "But how can that be? Jonah was swallowed by a whale." Irritated, the teacher reiterated that the whale could not swallow a human. "It is physically impossible," she said. Undaunted, the little girl said, "Well, when I get to heaven, I will ask Jonah." To this, the teacher replied, "Well, what if Jonah went to hell?" Oh, to which the little girl replied, "Then you can ask him." Yes, we're going to be discussing religion and faith and the difference between the two here. And this is from Rohr. The only sign Jesus offers. Jesus said, "No sign will be given except the sign of Jonah." Father Richard considers what Jesus meant when he promised the sign of Jonah. This strong one-liner of Jesus feels rather amazing and largely unheard. What's that noise? Is that what it is? That's what it is. I don't know. I'll just hold it like that. That's probably going to be easier. All right, I think I was here. See if I can. Try not to move. All right, I'll be very still from here on out. Take two. So Father Richard considers what Jesus meant when he promised the sign of Jonah. This strong one-liner of Jesus feels rather amazing and largely unheard. He even says it is an evil age that wants anything other than the simple sign of the prophet Jonah. He says it is the only sign that he will give. This is indeed unsatisfying, for it is not a sign at all, but more of an anti-sign. It demands that we release ourselves into the belly of darkness before we can know what is essential. It insists that the spiritual journey is more like giving up control than taking control. It might even be saying that others will often throw us overboard, and that we get to the right shore by God's grace more than right action on our part. It is clearly a very disturbing and unsatisfying sign. Faith is precisely no thing. It is nothing we can prove in order to be right or use to get anywhere else. If we want something to believe in, which is where we all must start, we had best begin as Christians with clear ground, identity, and boundaries. But that is not yet faith. That is merely securing the foundations for our own personal diving board. Faith is the leap into the water, now with the lived experience that there is one who can and will catch us and lead us where we need to go. Religion, in some sense, is a necessary first half of life phenomenon. Faith is much more possible in the second half of life, not necessarily chronologically, but always spiritually. To paraphrase Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, life must be lived forward, but it could only be understood backward. Jonah knew what God was doing, and how God does it, and how right God is, only after emerging from the belly of the whale, until he has first endured the journey, the darkness, the spitting up on the right shore, all in spite of his best efforts to avoid these very things. Jonah has no message whatsoever to give. Jonah is indeed a symbol of transformation. Jesus had found the Jonah story inspiring, no doubt, because it described almost perfectly what was happening to him. Much of my earlier work with men and spirituality was teaching them how to trust their time in the belly of the whale, how to stay there without needing to fix, to control, or even to fully understand it, and to wait until God spit them up on the new shore. It's called liminal space. And I believe all in-depth transformation takes place inside of liminal space. To hope too quickly is to hope for the wrong thing. The belly of the whale is the great teaching space, and thus it is no surprise that Jesus said this was the only sign he was going to give. So we have a lot of ground to cover there, just unpacking not only that little small section, a reference, a one-liner in the Gospel of Matthew there, but it also references the Queen of the South in that section as well. Now, wisdom. Wisdom is something that is talked about there, and that's wisdom through experience, and we all have our own examples of that. Actually, I was just thinking about this the other day, having a conversation with my brother. And his son is trying to get a job, but he needs experience. So how do you get experience without experience to get a job? And it's your first major job. So you have to they want people with experience. But you can't get hired unless you have the experience. And this is part of our life journey as well. We gain wisdom and knowledge through experience. And I need to unpack this a little bit too, because our understanding of the fullness of God is not just wisdom. That you have divine wisdom or understanding. But that has to be in balance. It has to be a marriage, an equal balance with divine love. That divine love has to be married to divine wisdom. And think of the example of someone, maybe they've learned a lot, they're a shrewd business person, but maybe not very warm, loving. They can be often perceived as cold. They understand things, but there isn't love. And the other extreme is also there, where it's overly loving and not having much sense of balance. And also where that love is given, but it's not returned, or it's not in harmony. So these two themes, divine love, divine balance, we can see them in ourselves, we can observe them in others, and maybe we can also discern for ourselves if we are on one side or the other of those. So that's a little bit of the theological framework from which we enter into more. I would offer as well that we've learned a bit over the years and times about the fields of psychology and how the primacy of love is so important for us all. As we grow up and we develop, we need love. We need to be given love. We need that in order to thrive in the world. And it's not just children, but our family got a golden retriever puppy end of last summer, and let me tell you, puppies, small animals, they also require love. And if they don't get it, they'll find a way to get your attention. Let me tell you. It's part of the design. We're not meant to be isolated and alone. We're meant to be in community. We're meant to share in that divine love, that divine wisdom. And we need to be able to put that into action in our own lives. The other thing I'll say about pets and animals, and the reason why we love being out in nature, the reason why we love newborn children, the reason why we love puppies and kittens, there's an innocence, there's a quality of them in this world. It's not tainted by all the things that we talk about, that we see on the nightly news, that we talk about in politics. There's a purity and innocence that we all get at some level, just being in their presence. So now it's time to kind of enter into the depths of what I just read from that small reflection by Richard Rohr, breaking down religion as a first half of life phenomenon, and that faith is a second half of life phenomenon. And for those that haven't explored the first and second half of life, there's a great book by Richard Rohr. It's called Falling Upward. It talks about those two things. I'm not going to dive into all of that right now, but at least I'll give you a glimpse of it, which is the first half of life is all consumed about gaining an identity in the world, who we are. And we need to succeed at that in order to become successful in the second half of life, which is essentially forgetting all of that, letting it go, because none of that's going to matter when we all transition from this life to the next. That is a spiritual metaphor for the journey, if we do it well, of gaining an identity, and the harder part, because we are a culture that thrives and lives and celebrates on the first half of life material, gaining success, who we are, the Hall of Fames, all of that. This is why the sign of Jonah is very unsatisfying to our modern psyche. We don't like this other sign that's given because it essentially is the opposite of number one, success, celebrating that first half of life. This is getting deep and dark into the belly of the whale and the beast in those darkest moments of your life. Probably not fun, not comfortable, not something you want to do again, and yet probably the biggest spiritual learning you ever do in your entire life are in those dark nights of the soul. Those times where we can do nothing in the world. Everything that we try and control fails at some level. And yet just sitting, resting, acknowledging that we do not have control, that something larger is at work in our life. If we can sit there and rest and maybe not be happy, or maybe we can find a little bit of acceptance, it's about as good as we get there. Eventually, we're going to be spit up somewhere new. That place that we arrive. And I'm going to guess that for most of us gathered here, what we thought we were going to be at, say, age 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, all those ideas of where we might go in the world, things we're going to do, how we're going to change it. We're going to look back now and say, well, Lord, here I am doing this. It's probably a little bit different than what you thought as an early age. And that's also the innocence. But it's an innocence of ignorance that we have young. Here we are, a few years, we've gone through life. We have the opportunity to enter back into innocence, but it's this time the innocence of wisdom. We've gained some experience. We know how things operate. We know ourselves, hopefully, a bit more. And this is good stuff. This is good material. Because all of this, and the sign of Jonah, reminds us all of, where we think we go, where we think we're being called. And we have that opportunity and some agency to try and get there. And if it's not in alignment with where God wants us, God has God's ways. They're higher than ours. They're wiser than ours. It may not feel like it's real loving at the time, but when we get to the other side, when we're spit up on those shores, when we're finally entering back into the sunlight, when we're on the beach, only then do we have that balance again. We've learned something. It's wisdom. We're feeling that divine love, hopefully, again. And we realize in retrospect, we had to go through this process. It could not be another way. Because if there was another way, we would have been able to find it. It reminds me of Psalm 139 about where we can try and escape. So we can all probably reflect upon our own moments of feeling that metaphor, the parable of being consumed within the belly of a whale or a serpent or whatever it is, a large creature that consumes us and we're in darkness for a period of time, and having that resistance. What can we do when we are there? So that's a part of the journey, and that's also a piece of the wisdom that we learn when we start to sort out what's real, what's true, what is God's, what is ours, where is our part in that, what can we celebrate with our gifts, and where is God leading us? For therein lies that, again, that balance, that wisdom with the enlightenment. Now the King Solomon and Queen Sheba. Queen of Sheba, this was obviously a long journey to get, where she was traveling with a large retinue. There was camels, there were servants, there was gold, there was spices. There was a long journey. It took a long time for this to take place. So what was it? What was the motivating thing there for Queen Sheba? She had heard the stories, she had heard the legend, not only the riches, but really the thing that moved her physically. She wanted to seek to know for herself if the legends were true, if what she had heard and the reports, was this truly a wise man? Was there something more than just the stories of the wealth? And I like this. We had a discussion this past Thursday, going through this as a small group, and I posed the question: Has there been any time in your life where you too have heard stories, someone that you wanted to go visit, you wanted to check out and see if the stories, the rumors were true, and you had to be there in person in order to kind of test that out? For some people, it might have been a concert you went to. It might have sounded good on a recorded version, but you had to go test it out, see if they were good live. For others, there actually were people were motivated to go and visit, to test and see, and visit them in real time. Because there are ways that, especially these days with AI, things can be faked and deep faked. But when we're talking about wisdom, when we're talking about stuff that is real and essential, we all want to be face-to-face and meeting with someone because so much is communicated and some of it is largely unspoken. There are some estimates that a culture, like cultural values, are somewhere in the range of like 80% unspoken. We see something, we want to emulate it. All these ways that culture gets into us at a deep level without any words exchanged. So I value the effort that it took. And obviously this is, we're still referencing this thousands of years later. It's referenced by Jesus himself. So we got to consider why this was an important moment. The testing of wisdom, the testing of someone's reputation. So that's all part of the subtext. And I think it lifts up something as well, something that we can also see quite clearly that has not gone away, which wealth, the show of wealth, the ostentatious side of things, where we have CEOs presently here in America that make 300 times the worker. We still have these huge disparities. The show of wealth, what does that do? How does that make us feel when we see large displays of that in the world? It also shows us that we're not too different. In thousands of years, we still get enamored by the glitter of the world, the things that we find pleasure at the level of our senses. And I do believe we are also at the cusp of a great spiritual awakening. And it's not to say that things of this world are bad, but it is to get into what is the value of finding wisdom that transcends all of the pleasures of this world. So if you have lived long enough, if you've gotten swallowed into the belly of the whale, you've come out the other side, you know something new about how God works, your relationship to the living God. And there's value in understanding too, through the challenges. When we resist, there is the tendency that those things will stay in place, they will persist until we change. So we have to make an assumption that you're all here, we've made it out of those places. And that's where we get to some brighter things here. Psalm 119 celebrates this. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. And let me tell you, that phrase alone, if we can just live that out, if we can consider any decision we ever do in life and consider, is this leading along that path? Are we in bringing in the Lord in every one of those decisions? Let me tell you, it will save us more time within the belly of the beast, or the belly of the whale, or the sea creatures, whatever metaphor you want to do. Because we know we're given instruction on where we're going, where we're moving, how we can still navigate with the light of the living God. And if we're feeling lost, it is a renewal, trusting in the Lord that we will be brought either way to a better place, that God has a destiny for each of us. And that's part of the wisdom, knowing what it is that we need to learn along the way, what's going to help us, what's going to be supportive, knowing a bit quicker about what are ways that are getting blocked and others that are being that lamp along our way. And when we learn to walk in the darkness, that's really ultimately the test of faith and the wisdom that we've learned along the way. When you walk to the edge of all the light you have and take the first step into the darkness of the unknown, you must believe that one of two things will happen. There will be something solid for you to stand upon, or you will be taught how to fly. I'll give one final bonus round here. It's my last sermon for a while, so oneness with everyone. And this is kind of a celebratory connection with all. If everything belongs, then no one needs to be punished, scapegoated, or excluded. God has loving room for all of us, even those we consider enemies. Howard Thurman insisted that everyone is a child of God. And this understanding that if I'm a child of God, God contains within itself often unrealized everything. If I embrace this notion about myself, I must accept the corollary. That is, if I am a holy child of God, then so is everyone else. This sentiment is echoed in an interview with Howard's daughter, Olive Thurman Wong, bemoaning the fact that people didn't comprehend or understand the importance of her father's legacy and work about the oneness of all. Thurman scholar Liza Rankow said, "It is even an easy thing to profess until we realize that it must include not only the people we like and agree with, but also those whom we are sympathetic, but also those who we view as abhorrent. We don't get to choose who we are one with. It's everybody. Sometimes the faces of people I detest flash across my mind and heart. How can they possibly be holy children of God?" Howard Thurman answers this question in the final chapter of Jesus and the Disinherited, pointing to the centrality of the love ethic in Jesus' teachings. He observes the types of people Jesus befriended who, by all accounts, should have been absolute enemies. Thurman points out to the necessity of extinguishing bitterness within the heart in order to recognize adversaries also as holy children of God. Thurman emphasizes Jesus' teaching of love, to love our enemies, as a radical challenge to love as if everyone belongs. Jesus, however, approaches life from the point of view of God. The serious problem for him had to be, is the Roman a child of God? Is my enemy God's child? If he is, I must work upon myself until I am willing to bring him back into the family. If God loves them, that binds me. Can it be that God does not know how terrible my enemy is? No. God knows them as well as he knows himself, and much better than I know them. So it must be true then that there is something in every human that remains intact, inviolate, regardless of what he or she does. I wonder, is it true? Is there an integrity of the person so intrinsic in its value and significance that no deed, however evil, can ultimately undermine this given thing? If a person is of infinite worth in the sight of God, whether they are a saint or a sinner, whether they are a good person or a bad person, evil or not, if that is true, then I am never relieved of my responsibility for trying to make contact with this worthy thing in them. And may the Lord so help us all. Amen.